Hey folks, welcome to today's webinar powered by TACK and Club PF with Terminus. My name is Mark Hins. My very special guest today is Jenna Chambers. Jenna, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How long have you been with Terminus?
Just over 2 years. So in some ways it feels like 5 minutes. In some ways it feels like 5 years. It was in that kind of weird working from home stage where time doesn't move in a normal way anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I hear that. If you folks have any questions, want to let us know where you're listening in from, throw it up in the chat. You should have access to the chat. If you don't, I can enable it. In case for some reason the chat isn't enabled, let us know in the Q&A. So you can use the Q&A in the chat. If you're listening to this on demand, thank you so much. Jenna, you've been with Terminus for 2 years. You have a lot of experience in B2B tech. You've done many different things over the years. We're going to unpack one of your favorite topics today, which is how to make sure your sales team is truly a partner with you when it comes to your account-based marketing.
It is a topic that is very, very, very close to my heart. As a career marketer who's recently gone to the dark side of sales, this has been a hot topic for me from the marketing side, and now I see it from the sales side. It's actually a different perspective. So it's nice to be able to bring the two together.
I love it. And the key to all of this, when you think about your ABM, is the who. Like, who are you trying to ultimately become a customer with the help of your sales team, right? So we're going to dive into this right now. Jenna, do you want to do any more of an introduction before we dive into today's talking points, though? Do you want to tee anything else up for people?
No, I think it's just, so I came up through, I would say generalist marketing, kind of all aspects from kind of branding to PPC to demand gen, et cetera, et cetera. And I was in-house in a company when we were doing more traditional sort of lead and demand generation. And we decided to make the move to, I'm going to age myself here, but we called it strategic key account pursuits as opposed to ABM because it was slightly before that was a thing. And we had to figure it all out on our own. We didn't realize that there were a bunch of resources out there. We didn't realize that there were tried and tested methods. And so we went through that move on our own. And that probably took us about a year, 18 months to do, and it was a lot of lessons learned, which hopefully are helpful for you guys. Painful for us at the time, but helpful to be able to kind of pass on. And then since then, I ended up agency side, so I was doing like go-to-market strategies for clients. A lot of those were ABM, and those are some of the examples that I'll touch on today. And then I've now ended up vendor side in a partner role, which is most recently ended up moving into heading up the sales team as well, because we were just getting so focused on how best to run a partner deal that it became clear it wasn't that much difference for a direct deal. And so now the whole new biz team, the revenue team sits under me.
Fantastic. Well, let's actually get into those conversation points today then. Let's go right into it. And those 3 conversation points are going to be about getting sales to truly buy into your ABM, how sales and marketing can actually work together, and what sales needs to know to excel at this account-based marketing motion. And again, like, I would love to know people's take on like what ABM is. There's so much debate about this, Jenna, out on the internet, right?
Oh yeah, I've not heard any of that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's so much debate. But yeah, like let's unpack each of these. So I'll let you run through the first one, and folks, again, like, we're gonna make this a conversation. Ask questions, give us your opinions. My high level opinion on ABM, Jenna, is it's part of your go-to-market strategy. It isn't like a go-to-market strategy on its own. It's a way to really understand how to go after that ICP and make sure that you're doing it in a unified way. But at the end of the day, like, ABM, wasn't anything that's remarkably new, because sales has been doing ABM for a long time. It's like marketing is now caught up thanks to Terminus creating the category. That's my general take.
Well, it's really interesting. So just kind of before we dive into that first point, I was having a conversation this week at the Gartner conference with a massive blue chip organization. It was their global marketing team. And they were asking me, like, is it normal for salespeople to lead evaluation of a tool like Terminus. And I was like, no, it's not normal. They're in the conversation, but normally marketing leads the conversation and they bring sales in. And they were saying that they feel like they're behind the ball because in their company it's sales that's pushing for ABM and it's marketing that's kind of going, oh, I'm not entirely sure what this is. And they're kind of in the research phase, which is one of the first times I've ever heard that that's a thing. So maybe this transition is already starting to happen out in markets. This is maybe a very timely conversation that we're having just now.
One can hope. So let's dive into the first topic. Pull up the slide again so you guys can take a look and follow along. Let's go right into it, Jenna. What do you think?
Perfect. All right. So trying to weave a bit of an analogy through this, which is that, so today's session is all about how do you enable sales for ABM. And there's two things that you need to do before you can even start to enable sales. This is the first one. The first one is all about making sure that you've got sales buy-in. Thinking about the analogy of skiing, it's, you're not going to go book a ski holiday, or you're not going to even think about going skiing or getting on that plane until you've gone to buy your ski gear. Like, it is step one of what you need to do. And this is exactly the same for sales and marketing alignment. So if you can pop onto the next slide, Mark. It's just a fact, I think we're all aware of it, that people hate change. Like, they just hate change, even if it's going to be good for them in the long term. There's something very, very comforting about the status quo, that kind of phrase of better the devil you know. But I think we all know that if you're going to launch ABM, it is almost impossible that you're going to get all the sales team on board almost overnight. That's just not going to happen. You can put the best plans in place, you can have the best strategy in the world, but that is not necessarily going to happen because there is an internal culture shift that needs to happen. So you've got some choices about what you can do here. You can be bullish and just mandate that they get with the program or get out. But I mean, that is always going to feel like something that is being done to them rather than done for them. And you're going to have some sort of coup on your hands. It might be a silent coup. People might not kind of chat back about it. You might not hear too much about it, but they will just polish off their resume or their CV and they will just go job searching and you will just have an exit. And it's just not the way to do it. So in terms of how you can go about this, in a way that's maybe a bit more helpful for the sales team, there are three methods that I've seen work. And then I'll talk about the one that's my personal favorite, which is dead giveaway, has the blue heart beside it. So let me talk about the other two first. The first one is you can do this by, you can change the comp plans. So it's, if you make ABM a profitable way for the sales team to do business, there's a lot of culture change that can come from comp plans. That's kind of the whole point of them, is that they almost are used to drive behaviors. So maybe ABM accounts come with higher commission tiers when they close. Maybe there are kickers if target accounts get to certain stages of the funnel. There are different ways that you can start to incentivize sales to move that way that doesn't just wait until the revenue hits the bank. Because if you only incentivize through comp plans through a revenue target, then salespeople will go to the path of least resistance to get to the most money. And that's good. That's what we want them to do. That's why they add revenue to our bottom line. But if it's just as profitable for them to keep doing what they've done before, but just do it faster versus do it with ABM, they're going to do what they've done before. So you need to start to introduce incentivizations through the process and ways of working, not just the net outcome result. So that's one option.
Okay. That makes sense. And you know what, just a quick thought on that. I've never really, as a marketer, would to think, of course, what are people motivated by, especially in sales? Money. Why don't you align that incentive kind of out of the gate? That's a brilliant and obvious, somewhat obvious, but it isn't obvious. It's insight almost, Jenna.
Well, and honestly, it was a bit of an eye opener for me as well. As a career marketer, we're not as driven by comp plans. That's not really how we operate. So we've just sat down and redone my team's comp plans. And step one was, okay, how do we want them to work? How do we want them to get after this revenue? Not just what's the revenue number, but the how. And then we built the comp plans against that. And, I was guided by our CRO, who's been doing this for a long time. And I was the same as you. I was just I've not thought about it this way before, but this just makes so much sense.
It does. It does. All right. So the second one then, if we take a look at it, is lay out the future utopia.
Yeah, so this is like, you can just like appeal to their innate sense of what good might look like in the future. You can go on a bit of an internal education mission, like explain the expected impact that the ABM program is going to have on ACV and time to close, and basically get them excited about what working in an ABM motion is going to be like for them, as opposed to what it's going to be like today. And basically you just create sheer excitement and will, and you do loads of enablement, and you just hope that you've done such a good job of basically selling ABM to salespeople that they just adopt it. You can immediately think of all of the all of the ways that can go wrong, and it's one of the reasons that I don't tend to do it that often. I have seen it done, but I've only really seen it work where you have salespeople who have done ABM in the past selling it to their peers, which kind of leads me on to the third point here, which is what I do, which is about finding one or two innovators. So, you've got that typical bell curve of change. You find your early few innovators, then you get your early adopters, and then you get the early majority. So your innovators are those sales folks who they're open to new ways of working. So maybe they've done ABM in a previous organization. Maybe their personality is just like, what do I do next? Like, how can I do better, and can I do more? But for the marketing side of the house, it is easier to get one or two folks onboarded and fully enabled than it is an entire sales force. But then you end up, if you do this well and those early innovators see more success, you're going to have people knocking down your door asking why they're not part of the program, and you've managed to kind of affect that change. So a bit of a story of how I've done this before. So when I was agency side, we had a customer who wanted to move to ABM, and it was the marketing team who wanted to make that move. Sales did not. It was a sales team of about 60 people, and we were just like, this is just going to be impossible. So we need to find an early innovator. So we went actually for the most difficult person. We found a guy who had retired 3 times because he was that age. He just loved sales so much. He just kept coming back to various jobs. And we thought, if we can get him on board, we can get anyone on board. So we kind of set our sights on him as like the pin to topple first. And so we did, the full enablement around him. We did a discovery session with him on his sales process to just basically figure out kind of where the gaps were, where the sticking points were. And then our entire mission for him was, how can we have ABM help you overcome the sticking points that you're already experiencing? So don't try and implicate pain that's not there. Figure out what pain is already there and show him how ABM is going to help him solve for that. So for him, he was not getting into deals early enough. Like the type of sale that he was selling into was like, if you are the incumbent, you're basically locked in there for 10 years. And he was not able to sort of get ahead of those sales cycles. So the focus for the ABM program for him was focusing on accounts that we knew were likely to have projects coming up, and that he started to engage with them before there was an open opportunity, before there was a sales cycle. So he was able to build relationship, become a trusted advisor. So I'll tell you a bit more about that story when we go on to talking about the account plans, which we'll get to later. But I could never have been as persuasive as a 60-something-year-old sales guy who everybody assumed was stuck in his ways, who wouldn't want to do it, going around all of his peers and telling them that we'd saved him a year's worth of work on his target accounts, and that we managed to land him meetings with 80% of his target accounts within the first 6 months. Like, those floodgates just opened. And I think by finding your early innovators, like, your aim is about creating fear of missing out, and you basically become a magnet for the sales team, as opposed to you trying to persuade them. They're coming to you asking for it, and that's when you kind of cracked that internal buy-in.
I love it. It reminds me of Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore, right? You have innovators,
Yeah.
early adopters, and then it's like, people need this and want this, right? So it's like, once you do that, everyone on the sales team's like, I need this and I want this so I can hit my quota, right? But like, you have to kind of have those, they call it in the book, the lighthouse customers, the lighthouse logos. You need your like lighthouse salespeople almost.
Yes, that is exactly the book that this idea came from. That's exactly what that was.
No, it's great. I love it. And actually, this slide, let me pull up one more time before we transition to the next topic for today's conversation. This slide is something that I really would recommend like folks use. Like, you could just take this from Jenna. You'll get the slides and recording after this. Like, hey, here are 3 ways we can start making change right now. The first one, again, I think is really smart, but not too obvious. But when you hear it, it's obvious. Laying out the future, sure. I think that's what a lot of people, I think, try to do. this third one is like, I agree, like the thing that's going to really help you change behavior. Salespeople listen and respect other salespeople. No offense, marketers. Look, I'm a marketer. Do salespeople really respect me as much? Like, no. Like the answer is no. So yeah, I think getting your buy-in from your sales champions around this is so important. Now let's talk about this now, Jenna. Defining the new ways of working. Look, I love snowboarding. I ski a bit, but I like snowboarding more. And I love, again, this kind of metaphor analogy you have set up here. You're not going to go black diamond right away. It's like, and I think it's better than, by the way, the crawl, walk, run stuff that we always hear. I like this one a lot better. But yeah, why don't you start unpacking this for us? Because this starts to get into like, yeah, the charter and the guiding principles.
Well, I mean, I'll let you in a little secret that this analogy has become a bit of a standing joke internally because I'm Scottish and I can't ski to save myself. And I was telling the team the other day about my one disastrous attempt at skiing where I did not do these steps. I basically decided, like, I'm from Scotland, I'm going to be innately good at this, and I just tried to ski and failed horribly and almost killed myself. So this is like a constant reminder to self as well, like, buy the right gear. This next step, so buy the right gear is getting your sales buy-in. This next step is basically go to the nursery slope, like get taught how to ski before you hit a slope. And that is about defining these new ways of working. So you cannot just have sales and marketing in their own silos buying into ABM and then just turn on ABM overnight. You now need to talk about how that's going to change how you're going to work together. So on the next slide, I'm going to flag specifically what we need to talk to the sales org about. Because again, like, you always hear sales marketing alignment and you need to work differently with ABM. And then everything that comes after that are bullets about what marketing needs to do. What about sales? Why do they need to care? What do they need to change? So I think the first thing to talk about is the sales cycle. So ABM is effectively flipping a sales cycle in its head a lot of the time. So quite often you're engaging target accounts in conversations with you. Some cases it's before they even know that they have a need. So if you think back to that guy that I was talking about earlier, if they sold, they were financial institutions and they were looking for cabling for their data centers. If they started to build or maybe put their plans together to build a new facility, by that point, they have already thought about who they're going to go to for RFP, probably the people they went to last time they built a new bank or a new trading floor. So what we needed to do was get him way ahead of that. So he needed to start to get in and influence those accounts and become known so that the next time they're even thinking about an RFP, he was already in their mind. And so that's what I mean about flipping that sales cycle. Is it is partly about making sure that you have got relationships established for when a commercial need occurs. So a really good thing that you can do here as a sales team together is sit down maybe with leadership, maybe with marketing in the room, and also map what you think maybe some expected sales cycles might look like with this new way of working. Don't let somebody else tell you what your sales cycle needs to be. Like, take some ownership of it. Like, okay, if I don't have somebody coming inbound asking for a demo, what would I do differently? And how would I engage with them? And I say some example sales cycles because by the inherent nature of ABM, they will be different. So maybe mapping out what you think kind of some high level paths, introductories might look like. That is where you can then sit down with marketing and say, okay, traditionally, this is our sales cycle and how we work together. We think that we might have these 3 different scenarios now when we do ABM. So do we have the right content? Are you able to help us with any of those stages? And basically together figure out like how you're going to work together against this new kind of process and sales cycle.
I love this because I'm a huge advocate and believer in creating customer journeys using customer engagement data points once someone becomes a customer. In this case, yeah, marketing is always trying to create the best customer journey, right? Like from the top to the bottom of the funnel. But in this example, it's not just like the marketing journey. It's like, no, like here's like the way in which we think we're going to have to actually, engage with people to get them into a conversation that has a chance of closing, which, selfishly sounds very, very much more people first approach than just saying, hey, like the brand is going to do all these activations and activities to hopefully get someone who's in market to raise their hand and do it. You're taking the customer journey idea, applying it to the sales lens and doing it up front and thinking about what the customer journey could look like before it even happens.
Exactly. It's like I think about ABM as like way more hand-to-hand combat. Like it is very kind of like person intensive, especially if you're doing one-to-one. You know, if you go to more of a one-to-many model, it can definitely be a bit more marketing led, and it can, you know, I think one-to-many ABM and demand gen have become so blurred and blended. I'm not even really sure that there's a massive difference these days. Like how sales teams are going to act in a one-to-many scenario is probably not too different from what they're doing today, but this one-to-one kind of very highly targeted or one-to-few, like this is where this kicks in.
I love it. I'll pull the slide back up and we can go into the next one then, which is
Drum roll.
the metrics that matter.
Yeah. So again, like if we think about the, you know, the traditional ways of working between sales and marketing, in a nutshell, it was marketing's job to bring sales leads and it was sales's job to close them. That's all going to go out the window. That is not how this is going to work anymore. First of all, your ABM leads or qualified opportunities or whatever you decide to term that phrase, they are going to be a mixture of inbound and outbound. Some of them will come to you through your marketing efforts. Some of them you're going to have to go pick up the phone or message on LinkedIn or whatever it is yourself. So we cannot start to measure kind of what marketing's given sales and then how it's moving through the funnel in ABM. So it's going to be more about kind of, yes, obviously it's going to be about revenue. Are you generating more and are you doing that faster? Do you have more in the pipeline? But that's, you know, that's a lagging indicator. How do you know earlier what's working and what's not working? Those leading indicators are going to be things like number of touches with your target accounts, how many engaged stakeholders you have from each of those accounts, what's the speed of the sales cycle, what is the ACV of that sales cycle. And so it's understanding from a sales perspective, especially if you've tied the comp plans to this as well, you're basically like, you know, kind of solidifying these new metrics in. So it's just about understanding what you're going to be measured on, not just as a sales team, but as an ABM team, because marketing is going to be measured on the same things as you are. So whereas I think sometimes sales and marketing alignment has gone wrong over the years is that you're measured on different things. So it's very hard to become aligned when the CEO is going to waggle his finger or her finger to you or you over different things. If you're both responsible for the same set of metrics, it does become a lot easier to line around it and become not, it's no longer what are you going to do about this, it's what are we going to do about this. So that's the the third piece. The other piece is basically talking about where the lines are going to be between sales and marketing, because in all honesty, I think it can become a bit blurry with ABM. So in my experience, sometimes marketing can be reduced to a support function of sales, or they can go the opposite way and they can get so far into the sales cycle that they end up doing the job of sales, and that experience, that intrinsic experience of selling that sellers have, gets lost for the process. So I think one of the best things that you can do is then define basically a roles and responsibilities model very early that sales and marketing both buy into. You know, you can capture that in a RACI model if you want, but you just need to make sure that it's neither side telling the other. It's both of you in agreement about how you're going to work together. So a really good example of this is when I was in-house, when I was a marketer. So this is when we made this move from lead gen to ABM. You'll have to excuse me. I've got the worst air conditioning in this room and I've got a very dry throat.
No. Take your time. Yeah, it's a hotel room. It's not the best. Not the best air quality usually in hotels. Yeah.
Like going for the back of my throat. So I was on the marketing side. So my sales counterpart and I kind of sat down and drew clear lines about who was going to do what in pursuit of those accounts that we decided to target together. So my role was intel and messaging, and his role was relationships and basically finding the commercial in. With the accounts. So with this approach, like we met weekly, we shared stories, we shared updates, what we'd learned that week. And then what was crucial was it wasn't just hey, here's what I learned, bye, see you next week. We would always end that weekly meeting with, okay, how is that going to change what we do next week? Are we going to have to change the messaging? Are we going to have to like reposition what we think the next meeting is going to be? Like, oh, and are we going to reach out to this person instead of this person, or are we going to call them rather than LinkedIn, or whatever it's going to be? It was always making sure that we were learning something from each week's engagement, as opposed to just adding another data point to the existing plan and ignoring what needed to change in the plan. So it really worked for us. So we spotted on a press release that Norway's biggest oil and gas producer was going to be moving for the first time to Scotland. They were going to open a HQ in Scotland, which is where we worked, and our ICP were oil and gas companies. So we put together like a whole plan to promote ourselves. It was very much about kind of like, hey, we are the company that oil and gas producers trust. So it was very much like social proofing. The whole campaign became about their peers who are already here talking about how much they trusted us and how great we were. And that was the entire thing. And that was everything from every person who reached out to them on LinkedIn. We had a whole team of people reach out and welcome them to the region, invite them to lunch, tell them good places to go buy food. Like, it was nothing to do with our tool. It was all about establishing relationships. All of the ads that we hit them with were all about kind of just basically trust in the fact that we were very experienced and that 80% of their peers worked with us, et cetera, et cetera. We then paid top dollar for PPC for the messages that we were hitting them with in the ads. And it worked. So when we were ready to launch when they were ready to launch their RFPs, we were already connected with a bunch of them. We were already multiple people in multiple conversations. We were invited to the RFP, not only to answer it, but we were invited to help shape the document. And then surprisingly, we won, and we got the business. So it was, if Andy and I had not work together like that, traditional marketing would never have come up with that, because obviously you just can't at scale. So that's maybe an example of how I've seen this work together.
I know, I love that example. And it also reminds me of it. You used at least 3, maybe 4 principles of influence, shouting out to Robert Cialdini in that example, right? Like you used authority, you used reciprocity. There was definitely consistency. So anyway, that's probably a webinar for another day, but I feel like, you use techniques that are just so innately, again, people first, just psychological techniques, right? To say, hey, look at us versus throwing your product at the company, right? Or throwing your brand at the company.
Well, and then I also think, and like side tangent, and you're right, it's probably a whole other webinar, is like, that is the really nice thing about ABM is that you can break out of like the normal way that you do campaigning, and you can just apply a bit of common sense. Like, what do we know? What do they need to hear? What's going to make them feel good? And you kind of have like the time and the ability to make that happen. I sometimes feel like with mass campaigns, like they're often running and you've slightly lost control of them and they're out and they're happening. Whereas this, you're much more, sales is much more of like the conductor of the whole relationship, and they're bringing the right people in and they're making sure the messages are there, and marketing is also reflective of that, so that as a target account, you just get this very simple, very elegant experience, and it just makes you feel like this becomes a natural choice.
No, I love that. Yeah, Nikita says a bit of common sense. Yeah.
It's underrated, honestly. Like the amount of times we sit down as a team about things and somebody's going to be like, hey, are we going to use this methodology or this theory? And I'm like, I don't know. What do they need? I don't care. Like, if there's a book about it, like, what would I want to happen? And let's do that.
Are you ready to hit the slopes now, Jenna?
I think so. Are you?
I'm ready. Oh yeah, I wish I was on the slopes right now. Man, that would be tremendous. But we're not, it's fine. So let's go hit the slopes. Let's start putting some of this stuff into action. So you should see that next slide now, and we're moving into the third topic of discussion today. How do you make this very, very practical?
Yeah, well, exactly. So like we've now been chatting for half an hour, but it is so important to make sure that you've done those first 2 steps before you start. So anything I'm about to speak about from now onwards, if you hadn't done the first 2 steps, it's not going to work. So this is very much like, now it's time to kind of come hit the slope. So if you go to the next slide, I basically have like 3 enablement points that I think are really important for sales when it comes to ABM. So the first one is about making sure that you have got sales involved in identifying target accounts. So there's a bit more detail on the next slide, I think, Mark.
So you don't want to just, hold on, just before we do that, you don't want to just say, hey, sales, here are the accounts we're going after?
No, you do not. And actually, as an agency, like the amount of times that we would have customers come to us and say, oh, hey, we're about to start ABM. We'd be like, great, do you have your target account list? And we're like, yeah, sales told us who they want to target. And we would all just sit and like face palm and go, oh no, oh no, this is just not going to work from the start.
So it goes both ways. You don't want sales just telling you, and you don't want marketing just to tell you. It's not going to happen. Okay.
Exactly. So we're like, it can't be a wish list from sales. And then 9 times out of 10, that meant that they would go back and go, okay, well, we'll just tell sales who to target. I'm like, no, it's neither. It needs to be both of you. So this is what this is all about, is just making sure that you, first of all, that you have defined your ICP. And again, that should be something that both sales and marketing are in the room for. So, I mean, ideally, you get to sit with RevOps and do this if you have a large enough team. That makes things a lot easier. There's a lot of data crunching that they can help do. But it's basically about finding, like, what are the common traits of existing customers, as well as opportunities that have progressed well through your pipeline, not just customers, where, you know, they have basically spotted patterns in what makes like a good fit customer there. So I always think that the key to a really great ICP is almost like a 2-tier ICP, a bit like a sales process. Like one is qualification and one is discovery. So at the qualification level, it's basic math, it's firmographics. Like, are they this size? Do they have this revenue? Are they in this geo, et cetera, et cetera? It's a bit more binary. And that's just pure qualification. Like, could they be a good customer or could they not? Yes, no, divide. And then of those groups that could be a good customer, what are those more intrinsic things like behaviors that you can't necessarily see just by looking like on a balance sheet or looking at their annual report. So you can find tools, there are like loads of them out there, to help you find companies that fit your ICP. And that's going to help you create your kind of total addressable or total relevant market. And from there, you're going to want to find your best bets. And that's where this second tier of almost like the discovery across that total relevant market kicks in. So who are those accounts that you're going to pull into your ABM program? And this is where sales and marketing together can be incredibly powerful. So you've got your third party and sometimes even your first party data points from marketing. So things like third party intent, web visits, how accounts are engaging with your content and how they're engaging with your marketing campaigns. But it's also like so important to also have what sales know about those accounts. Like, what conversations have they had? Who do they know over there? Which partners do we have that we know that have got ins over there, where we can start to understand not just are they a good fit on paper and are they showing the right behaviors, but are they actually willing to engage in a conversation, and blend all of those insights together to help you figure out who your target accounts should be. A really great way to bring that sales insights is to maybe use a tool like Gong, where you're not relying on a salesperson remembering 50 conversations that they've had over the last 2 years. You're able to like scrape all of your call data or all your recording data and start to like pull out patterns and things. And that's where somebody in RevOps can really help with that element as well.
Yeah, with machine learning now, there's a lot of like AI tools. Even Gong might have one inside their platform now, natively built, that allows you to like literally say, all right, out of this data set of this many calls, this is what I want to know. How many of our calls, or like not even how many, what are the top 3 problems that are heard most often in all of our calls? Who are asking those problems? What, yeah, literally, like you can just ask the data set through, you know, conversational interface now, those questions. It's super powerful. And I love your whole thing around, like, I call it like fit, and you use that word fit versus intent. What's the fit of the account versus the intent of the account, or really the intent of the buyers in that account?
Exactly that. Exactly. I mean, I could fangirl about Gong all day long. Gong Engage is a new module that they have, and I think that we're all about to become like supercharged versions of ourselves with that, because the things that would have taken us weeks to do, we're just going to get the answers to. And that's what I really like about, you know, the use of how Gong in particular has gone about AI, is it's all about kind of helping us do our jobs better. It's not about replacing anything. It's just about helping us be more efficient and have more insights.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so then you've figured out basically all of the accounts that you want to pull into your ABM program. And then you need to remember that not all accounts are created equal. So you ideally
Mm.
want to have a blend of accounts that are maybe showing buying behaviors right now versus those that are more like those white whale accounts that you want to go after. And so you're basically looking for a blended model across various tiers. So, the way that that tends to come up in ABM is who's going to be in your one-to-one campaigns versus your one-to-many versus your one-to-few. So like your one-to-one accounts are going to get the white glove treatment. The one-to-few accounts are going to be put into a cluster. They're going to be treated like a really tiny market. And then maybe accounts that are a good fit, but they're not necessarily showing the most amount of intent at the moment, but there's definitely something there. You maybe wrap them into a one-to-many program. So after everybody has agreed on the target accounts, the sales team should then take lead on creating account plans, especially for those one-to-one and one-to-few accounts, which I've neatly led myself onto my second enablement point at that point.
Yeah. No, this is super important. I can't wait to get your perspective on this. So we just flip to the next slide where Jenna has laid out a few more details of these target account plans. I have seen this done well. I wouldn't say amazing, and I've seen this not done at all. I would argue that if you don't do this at all, I don't think ABM will be super effective. I mean, you could do all the other stuff, but if you don't take the time to truly like hone in on an account and study it and understand like how to go after it and how to engage with it and what makes it a viable high ACV account. And like it's like basically trying to play a game without any preparation. And like you know what I mean, Jenna? I don't know. Like it's like never going on the bunny slope, just trying to go down the black diamond. Like good luck.
Well, like me, like a fool, exactly. Well, this I think where I see people like with good intentions and where it goes wrong is that people will put together like very detailed research dossiers on each of their target accounts, and they will understand to the nth degree everything about that account, which is brilliant. And you should absolutely do that if you have the time and the resources, and if not, do a cut down version of that. But they don't do what you just mentioned, was the okay, but how do we use that information? What does that mean for how we go after them? Like, how do we, I don't even know if there's a phrase for this, but go to market to one account, like go to account. Like, how do we do that given all the information that we have today? And that is what these account plans should do.
That is go to account. I don't think I've ever heard that term, but that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I just made it up. Maybe we should coin it.
Your go to account plan. Your go to account plan. Yeah.
Make
Your
it a
GTA.
thing. And this is where I think a lot of salespeople start to kind of feel a bit more in the driving seat and a bit more comfortable again, because sales folks are used to putting together plans. They're normally deal plans for opportunities that already exist in pipeline. And so this is really, it's exactly the same, but there are two key differences. One is that we're starting earlier, so before there is an open opportunity. And the second is that the plan should be from the perspective of the target account as opposed to from our perspective. And if you make sure that your entire target account plan is written from the perspective of the target account, you are not going to be able to help but make your touches personal and consistent and meaningful for them. And it's just if you read through your target account plans that you have today, I almost guarantee they're going to be written from your perspective, not from their perspective. Make that flip and put it in their perspective, and suddenly your messaging, your content, what to say to them next, it all becomes a lot clearer at that point.
That will, yes, yes, people first. That will be a clip from this webinar for sure. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, unpack this a bit more for everyone then. Yeah, like yeah, this is very important, I feel like.
Yeah. So things that I think are very important to go into these account plans are making sure that you have uncovered a North Star metric that you're selling against, because ABM is about creating long-term profitable relationships. It's not about getting to that first signature. It is about, 5 years from now, are you still a great partnership together? So making sure like what is very important to them. So I always have my sales team put together these account plans, and they're always identifying 6 months post the first signature, what is going to make that economic buyer, that decision maker, the CEO, super happy that they made the decision to go with us. Like, what metric has moved by how much in what time frame? Like, make it time bound, make it like an actual number that measurable. And that becomes, such a key part of this target account plan. And, the usual sales process applies here. Like, don't take the first answer, keep digging, keep asking why, keep getting further and further into that. What they think they need to measure might not quite be right. Maybe they're measuring against a symptom rather than the cause. So make sure that you get down to that proper cause. The next part is about a decision-making unit map. So before, obviously, you start to engage the account, you're going to be a bit limited on what you can put in there. And the whole point of these account plans is that they should be living, breathing documents. You shouldn't just write them and leave them on a digital shelf. You should be constantly adapting them. So you're only going to really be able to put things like job titles and who works for who at the start. But as you start to engage the account and you start to get into more conversation with them, you're going to be able to evolve the map to become, okay, what do each of these people care about? What are they personally being measured against? And how does that layer up to that North Star metric? So you're making a link between the people and the business objective. Another thing that I think is really useful to capture are things like, what is their personality like? How do they like to be communicated with? Who gets on with who will listen to who's in competition that you should never have tried to make decisions together because they're always going to beat each other. Stuff like that becomes invaluable if your target account is one account and you don't know those interactions. You can get lost for 6 months in some internal politics because you didn't navigate your way around that. So, it sounds like a very flippant thing to put on there, but it's actually really important. There's a tool that I've used before that I find really helpful before you engage with stakeholders. It's called Crystal Knows.
Oh yeah, yes.
That's excellent. And that basically sits on top of their LinkedIn profile and like gives you personality typing and gives you tips and tricks for communication styles for people. So before you go into that first meeting, I find it very helpful to have a quick look on Crystal Knows and just get an idea of the type of people I'm going in to meet with. I always make sure that the team have got current state listed out on the account plan. So how are they going about solving the problem that you're hoping to solve today? Is it working? What could be improved? What pains are they feeling? And then really vitally, how does your current state stack up against that North Star metric? If you keep doing what you're doing today, are you going to hit that North Star metric? And if the answer is no, great. You've implicated enough pain, like from a medic perspective, that they know that they need to do something about it. Then finally, where are they investing? So are they, where are the flagship project? Have they made any acquisitions? Do you know about their tech purchases, especially if you're a tech company, being able to know, their existing tech landscape, is that going to block you out of the account? Can you not integrate some of their tech stack? Or if they just bought a competitor of yours and they're locked in for 3 years, they might be a perfect target account, but you're never going to sell to them. So you should demote them and put someone else into your ABM program. So those are the highlights and the high level sections that I think need to go into those account plans.
I love it. I'll pull up one more time so everyone just take a quick look at it. If you want to take a screenshot, feel free. Again, you'll get the slides after the fact. You'll get the recordings. It's all going to be in the TACK network and Club PF. But those 5 things: North Star, decision making, unit map, current state, places where they're going to invest, and the tech stack. I love Crystal Knows, by the way. I forgot about that tool. Highly recommend it. Thank you for bringing that up, Jenna.
Yeah, I am obsessed. It is amazing. I was a bit unsure how accurate it would be. So the first thing I did when I got it was I put it on top of my profile, and it was like holding a mirror up to myself. What it spat back, I was like, yep, that's me. Okay.
Yeah. It's like it's a personality. It's not so much behavior, but it's definitely more personality. Yeah, it's like Myers-Briggs, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so then the third and final enablement point then for sales when it comes to ABM is around data, being able to kind of read it and know what to do with it, because everywhere that people speak about ABM, they're always talking about data first and data led. And there's a lot of triggers from data that help marketing, but salespeople are left going, I've just been inundated with a whole bunch of data and there's actually not much insight from it. It's just a bunch of stuff and they just don't know what to do. So I think the first thing is making sure that your sales team is aware that you need to able to spot engagement with your target accounts, because obviously you're not looking for like a book a demo or a lead. So what does engagement look like? And work with marketing so that you know what that signal looks like, so that you know what you're looking out for. So something is happening. And if you have a tool in place, you'll get some sort of trigger or alert. But if you don't have a tool and you're doing it manually, there are still many, many things that you can look for that it implies that an account is starting to engage with you. Sorry. Just because you've started to see that engagement does not mean it's time for sales to start blindly calling, emailing, messaging those accounts at a semi-regular interval in the hope that they can just nurture them into submission. It is the whole point of this data is meeting them where they are. So like, are they becoming, are they only showing third-party intent? If that's true, then they're probably solution or they're problem aware, but they're not solution aware, and they're certainly not brand aware. So you and marketing might want to work together to start to make them brand aware. And that might be the next step that you take there. Maybe they're coming to your site and they're not doing anything more than that. So how many people are coming to your site? How often are they coming to your site? What are they spending time reading? And therefore, what do you need to get them to do next to move on to that next stage? So that's kind of one of these keys to data is, or to read the data for ABM, it's understand where they are and what the next action is that you want them to take, as opposed to when can I call them? It's not about that anymore. It's about kind of like, okay, you're A, how'd you get them to B? They're D, great, how'd you get them to E? And it's just constantly helping accounts move along and move along. There's a flip side to the data point though, which is about personalized messaging and content. So again, that often gets interpreted as, what messaging are we going to put in our ads, and what content will marketing produce? But actually, where sales teams can really excel is if they can take the data on an account, understand where they are and where they need them to move next. That helps them craft the most personalized messaging for outreach or future calls, or for the next account or for the next meeting that they're going to get into, because that account feels like the vendor is then in lockstep with them. So two quick stories about this, and then I'll round this out. So the first thing is my team, what they do today is they prep for their meetings by looking at all of those engagement triggers and all of those data points. So they'll have maybe had one conversation with the account, they'll have agreed the agenda for the next one. They will always cover off the agenda they've agreed with, but they will also look at all of the engagement data, and they will figure out what else the account cares about, and they will naturally bring that up through the course of the second call. And the people who are on the receiving end keep saying, oh my goodness, yeah, actually we are talking about that. And how did you know that? And just, it makes them feel seen, which is very, vital for that relationship building. The other side of that is maybe before you're in a conversation with them. So social selling. So using that data to segment and prioritize within your target accounts. Map your messaging to their pain points and challenges that the data is telling you that they have. Being able to then take that messaging and making it persona specific, and then reaching out via social selling. I did that for a client once when I was agency side, and we added 1.2 million to their pipeline in 6 weeks, which was just phenomenal. And I think the key was all of the messaging was written based on the data, but then sales and marketing wrote those messages together. So marketing didn't write a fluffy marketing message for sales to send, and sales didn't try to sell. Together they came to like the perfect kind of just start a conversation message, and it was just, I've never seen results like it. It was game changing.
I love that. No, that's really smart around yeah, I mean, not all signals of engagement are equal. Kind of a lesson right there, to sum it up. And then when you think about preparing to go down the slope, to go down the slope, it's not just about the practice, but it's also then like, it's almost maybe not just in time, research, but if you do it that day or the day before, using the signals to understand where the buying team is right now, since you last talked to them or since you last tried to reach out to them.
Exactly. Like we had one, it was actually a Monday, one of my team messaged me in the morning, and he was like, oh, I have a conversation this afternoon, and all the conversations to date have been about ads, and we were about to close a deal, but actually this morning they have been all over the site looking at our chatbot feature. I'm going to bring that up as well. And I was like, go ahead, go forth. And they were like, actually, because it hadn't been mentioned in the sales cycle, we didn't know that you had one, but we were looking at one anyway. So could we do both? Yes. and now we're on a totally different sales cycle, which wouldn't have happened if all we'd done is just take the agenda from the last call. So to that point about that just-in-time research, like it does change the trajectory of deals.
No, I love that. Folks, we're wrapping up. If you have any questions, we can stay on for another 5 minutes. Jenna has generously also given you folks some resources, which you'll have in the follow-up as well. But there's a great ebook you've identified and a course that you guys have too from the Terminus website that people can check out to go deeper.
Yeah, so the course is completely free. It's a bit of a time investment. It takes about 7 or 8 hours. It's not quick, but I had done ABM for quite a long time before I took it. I had to do it as part of my onboarding, and I was a bit snobby about it. I was like, I don't need this. I've done ABM for a long time, and I took it and I took a lot of notes. It's actually really good. So highly recommend. And then I've left my LinkedIn on the next slide. So if you guys want to like not have a conversation here, if you want to follow up with any of the points that we've spoken about, not about Terminus, but just about sales and ABM, then more than happy for you to connect.
Let me actually let me just copy this link right now, and I'll drop it in the chat for everyone so you can connect with Jenna right now on LinkedIn. Big thank you, Jenna. Folks, if there's any questions, like I said, we have about 4 minutes or so. We're right on time. Fantastic content. Thank you so much for this. I learned a couple things today, which is, it's always the goal when you go to any of these like types of webinars or you consume any content. Does it teach you something? I think that's kind of like the watermark, right? And so hopefully you folks learn some stuff. Sam, you're welcome. Jenna, any last you could say key takeaway or anything you want to leave everyone with?
No, I mean, I'm glad if it's been useful. Like, you're all welcome. I sit through a lot of webinars and I get so frustrated if I get to the end and I'm like, oh, that was just so high level. Like, there's nothing I can take away from that. So hopefully there was at least 1 or 2 nuggets. I've had a really good time. This is a great chat. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, no, thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Again, if you're listening to the recording, thank you for taking the time to do so. Check out more resources on the TACK network. Terminus, of course, has a ton of things about account-based marketing, account-based selling. Check out terminus.com. And folks, we'll see you at the next one. It's in a couple weeks, end of June. Talk to you soon. Thanks again, Jenna.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.